Hello, everybody. Hello from snowy Buckinghamshire. When you put in the chat box, I want to hear who got snow as well today, because we got snow today, but it's all rained away now. So it's not snowy anymore, not really. But thank you all so much for being here today. It's lovely to have so many people come to see and learn about this book. I'm here for the Reading Agency Presents. The Reading Agency is an amazing charity, so thank you very much for supporting them. And I'm here to talk about this book. This is Eureka, Inspirational Women in STEM. So first, a little bit about me. Here's my face. I'm Dr. Frances Durkin. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a historian and a writer, and you can call me Frankie. Everybody calls me Frankie. So I'd really like you to do that too. Now, the first thing I have to say today is Happy National Nonfiction November. I made that very pink. It's Reading Agency pink. It's EUREK-HER pink. It's very, very pink. But the National Nonfiction November is a celebration of nonfiction books and the way that they fit into your reading journey. So I want to talk today a little bit about nonfiction and what it is, about me and why I'm a nonfiction writer, and then talk to you about Eureka and what it does as a nonfiction book and what you can get from it. So happy National Nonfiction November. But let's begin by asking, what is nonfiction? Now, I'm pretty sure you probably already know this. You probably have lots of nonfiction books that you read in your school or at home or at the library. To make it simple, fiction is stuff that's made up and nonfiction is what's real. So if you're reading a book about witches and wizards or fairies or monsters, then it's probably a fiction book. Whereas if you're reading a book of facts, maybe about the human body or about nature and animals or about history and castles, then that's most likely a non-fiction book. Now, the two forms of book do overlap. So you could read a fiction made-up story that is set during the Great Fire of London, or you could read a fiction book about going into space. A fiction book can contain lots of non-fiction material. But for our purpose today, a non-fiction book is about any of these subjects. You could read non-fiction books about sport, about animals, about airplanes, about dinosaurs, science, geography, art, maths, all manner of things that you learn at school, whether you do DT, whether you're doing experiments in science. These are things that you go to non-fiction books to learn about. So I'm very, very lucky that I usually write historical non-fiction books. So I want to tell you about why I love nonfiction and how I got into writing it. And that story really starts when I was probably about your age. So I didn't go to school. I was home educated, and my parents would take me out on lots of visits to museums, or we'd go and learn things and watch things on the TV and documentaries or read books. I spent a lot of time in the library as a child. But when I was about 8 or 9, I discovered this film. So there's a poster here for a film about an ancient Greek myth. And the movie is called The Clash of the Titans. Some of your teachers might know it. You might have seen it. It sometimes is on the telly still. And it's about the hero who needs to rescue a princess, and there are monsters, and he gets to ride on a flying horse, and there are Greek gods, and there's a little mechanical owl. And I saw this when I was about 8 or 9, and I loved it. I thought it was amazing. So even though it's a fiction story, it's mythological, it's got gods, it's got extraordinary creatures, I wanted to know about the world this story came from. So I learned everything I could possibly learn about ancient Greece. I read everything, I knew everything. I watched films like this. I read non-fiction books, I read fiction books, I knew all the myths. I absolutely loved it. I was a complete nerd about it all, and I read everything I could get my hands on. And then as I got a bit older, things changed a bit, and we moved to a place called Nottingham. Now, some of you might be able to see, or you might already know what Nottingham is famous for. Nottingham is famous for a person called Robin Hood. Now, the legend of Robin Hood has been turned into movies. Here's the Disney movie Robin Hood. There are songs about Robin Hood. There's all sorts of things about Robin Hood. And in Nottingham, it's the heart of the tourist industry. So I ended up working in the tourist industry, learning more about Robin Hood, loving researching the history. I mean, here's me on some historical travels, some holiday pictures for you. That's me in Rome there in the Colosseum. which was where the ancient Roman gladiators would fight. And there, the little fuzzy picture at the bottom of me in a sleeping bag is me spending the night at Hampton Court Palace, which is a castle that Henry VIII once lived in. I got to stay there overnight and look for some ghosts. So I have loved history since I was small. And now as an adult, I still get to do it. So I went to university to study history. You can see a picture of me there giving a research paper to an audience of other academics. That's how I got my PhD. That's how I'm Dr. Durkin, although nobody seems to call me that. Everyone just calls me Frankie. And there you can see me talking at History Festival about ancient Greece, appropriately. And there's another picture of me storytelling Greek myths at the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford. So after seeing that film when I was just a child, today I get to talk about all kinds of history, and my love of it keeps growing and growing and growing. And the more I research and the more I learn, the more I love to share. So to give you an idea of some of the non-fiction things that I have written about, I don't know if you can read this list properly. Let me go through it. I've written about Harry Houdini, who was a very famous magician, dangerous art, the history of bananas, time machines, recycling, an adventurer and explorer called Amelia Earhart, hidden treasure, dodos, an extinct bird called the dodo, elves, the history of elves, of course, popcorn, graffiti, cameras. I loved writing about the history of ice cream. I did a lot of research for that. Leonardo da Vinci, who was an artist in Italy during the Renaissance, dolls' houses, cats, a train, an amazing train called the Orient Express, Lego. I imagine there's some people who like Lego in the audience today. Vending machines. There's a whole history to vending machines where you can go and get your can of drinks. King Arthur, the legend of King Arthur. Sir Isaac Newton, who we'll hear a bit more about today. The Great Fire of London, the history of music, and even sea monsters. So there's a whole range and a never-ending list of fantastical things that you can find a non-fiction perspective of and write about. And I'm so lucky that that's my job. But why do we need non-fiction? Now, I think it's really interesting for non-fiction November to think about that, because when we read fiction, it stretches our imagination, it shows us the places in the world or outside of the world that we can travel to. But non-fiction is a little bit different. I think we need non-fiction to tell us about the world we are in, to answer the questions we have about the world we're in, and to help us ask more questions. So I'm going to talk today about EUREK-HER, which is Stories of Inspirational Women in STEM. Now, this is the book that I worked on with a very lovely publisher, and lots of women worked on this book. My editor, Alice, was a woman. Vicky, who designed the book's a woman. Nur, who did all the illustrations, a woman. So we did lots of work together to create this fascinating book about incredible women. So let's start by looking at what STEM is. Now, I'm not sure if you've heard this term before. STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So these are all things that you look at school, you do at school, but combined together, we call them STEM. And if we think about some very famous people in STEM through history, does anyone recognize these men? So we've got, first of all, Isaac Newton. Now, Sir Isaac Newton, he came up with the idea that there's a force that pulls things towards the earth called gravity, and he created laws that affect how things move. He had laws of motion. He was very, very famous. The next man, there's some good hair going on here, actually, good beards and good hair. This is Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin was a naturalist who came up with the idea that animals, the genetic gene pools of animals adapt to fit with where they live. So you may find that giraffes with longer necks survived in places where trees were higher and they could reach the leaves. He talked about finches, a kind of bird on different islands in the Galapagos, where there were different species, but they looked very similar, but they were all adapted to reaching different food or different conditions on each island. So he realized that they'd genetically adapted to fit their environment. The next man is Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein was a physicist. He came up with the idea that the gravity in the world, so he thought that the gravity of enormous objects affected the objects in the world, time and space around them. It's his theory of relativity. He worked on basically ideas from Isaac Newton. And then the last person here is a man called Alan Turing. And he worked near where I live. He worked at a place called Bletchley Park during the Second World War. He was a mathematician and a code breaker. Thanks to his work, the British Army were able to crack codes from the enemy, and they think his work cut the Second World War short. They managed to finish it earlier. And the mathematics that he worked on is actually what has enabled us to have modern day computers. So the fact you're watching me on a computer screen now is in large part thanks to Alan Turing. So if we look at this collection of very famous scientists, some of the most famous scientists that I could think of off the top of my head, and we might notice they all have something in common. They're all men, and they're all white European men. So each one of these people is extraordinary. I don't want to take anything away from what they achieved or what they did, but they're not the whole picture. So we're going to use Eureka to show us that there's much more to scientists of any period in time than what you see here. And there's two reasons I think that's really important. I want you to show that not only is this not the whole picture, as a researcher, I want to show you more than there is, but I want to show you what's possible for you. If you see a list of scientists and all you see are white men, you might think, well, only white men can be scientists. So I can't be a scientist if I'm a girl or a person of color. So I want to use this book to expand on what you might already know. So let's begin with one of the women from our book. This is Mary Anning. You might have come across Mary Anning before. It was so difficult, I have to put in now, to choose the 20 women that we put in this book. And it was even more difficult today to choose a handful of women to talk about in this workshop. But Mary Anning was an easy pick, really. So Mary Anning grew up on the south coast of England. And she was quite poor. Her family were very poor. When she was a baby, she was actually struck by lightning, but survived. I love that fact about her. It makes her amazing from when she was tiny. But she and her family would explore the beach, where there was lots of fossils. There were lots of ammonites and lots of pieces of fossilized bones that they could then sell to tourists who came to visit the beaches. As she got older, she got better at it. After her father died, it became more important for her family that she was able to look for more fossils, sell more fossils. And as a girl, she hadn't had much opportunity to have an education. At the time when she grew up, it was very unusual for girls to go to school. She did learn to read, but everything else she accomplished and learned. She was actually self-taught. So she learned about geology, she learned about biology. So she taught herself an amazing number of things. And when she was 12 years old, she found the full fossilized skeleton of a creature called an ichthyosaurus. Did I say that right? I think I said that right. I can write that better than I can say it. And she found this complete skeleton. And she managed to sell it. So she made more money for her family. And she kept doing this. She kept becoming more of an expert. She kept finding more dinosaur bones. Actually, the one thing I learned researching Mary Anning is that not all dinosaurs are dinosaurs. And any creature that could swim or could fly is not classed as a dinosaur. So it's a swimming reptile or a flying reptile, but an ichthyosaurus is not a dinosaur. So I mustn't say dinosaur, I should say fossils. And she would sell fossils. People, experts and educated men from all over the country, from museums who were collectors, they'd come and visit her. They'd find out information from her because she was such an expert. She could tell them about everything. And they would buy her fossils, and then they would take them and they may put them on display, or they may sell them, usually for much more profit than they paid her. So she went through her life discovering amazing things. But it was only after she died that she really received the attention and the credit that she deserved. Today in the Natural History Museum in London, there is a whole section, a Mary Anning gallery of fossils that she found. There's one here and a picture of her right beside it. And it is, I don't know if any of you have ever had a chance to go to that part of the Natural History Museum, but it's amazing. And to see her name there is really, really special and really beautiful. And there's a statue of her as well in the place that she grew up in Lyme Regis, holding a little ammonite fossil and the tools of her trade that she would go and use. So I think she was an amazing woman to include in this book. And I'm really happy that we got to talk about her and include her as a scientist who came from a background that really she shouldn't have been able to achieve what she did. She was poor, she had a lack of education, and yet she was groundbreaking and incredible and inspirational. Now, the next lady I want to talk about also had a difficult childhood. This is Margarete Steiff. Now, Margarete Steiff was an inventor. When she was little, she got a disease called polio. Polio used to be very, very serious. It made children very, very poorly. Some children didn't survive. Today, we vaccinate against polio, so it's very unusual. It's very rare in the world now. But when she was little, it meant that she was sick. It meant that she couldn't walk properly, and it meant that she lost some of the movement in one of her arms. But she was determined. So her brothers and sisters would take her around in a cart, and Marguerite learned to sew. She learned to become a very good seamstress. She would make clothes. But one day when she was making clothes and using up fabric, she had the idea to make a little cuddly toy, little soft toy. I've got loads of them in my house. I've got two little girls. Here's one. This is a little wolf. I think the first one Marguerite made was an elephant. And she gave them as gifts to the children around her. But they were so popular, she started to be able to sell them. Over time, Marguerite increased the number of creatures that she made. She would make all kinds of soft animals that she could sell. She ended up setting up her own factory. She employed lots and lots and lots of people and became a businesswoman and inventor. Eventually, her nephew had the idea for making a bear instead of the elephants and the things they usually made. They made a bear. And that bear, the Steiff bear, is still here. I've got a little tiny little Steiff bear, tiny little Steiff bear. This used to belong to my mum. And it has all the symbols of being Steiff. It's got a little tag on the front. It's got a little yellow label on its ear. I don't know if you can see that. And it's a tiny little Steiff bear, a recent one. And Steiff bears are some of the most famous in the world. They're still made now. I think the most expensive bear that was ever sold, both at an antique one and a newly made one, was Steiff bears. So you can spend hundreds of or tens of thousands of pounds on buying a Steiff bear if it's the right one. And you can go into lots of big toy shops and buy them today. I think the story of her factory creating a bear is really interesting because at the same time over in America, another company created a bear, which they nicknamed after their president, Teddy Roosevelt. So it became the teddy bear. So although both bears were made at the same time, neither company knew about each other. So we could say they both invented the teddy bear. Bears are really important in my house to get my kids' toys out again. My youngest daughter is only 1. And of all the words she knows bear. This is her bear. And when she's tired, she asks for bear. So we get bear for her. And my other prop today, this is showing how old I am. I have a Steiff bear. Now, my Steiff bear is very old. It's so old and it's so special. She's still in her box. And I got this when I don't know how old I was. My auntie took me into London for it. Got to choose it from a toy store called Hamleys. It's a special limited edition Steiff because it has a little white tag on its ear, not a yellow one. And her name is Charlotte. And she came from a big toy store called Hamleys. And she's been in her box for about 30 years. And I found her today and I thought maybe I should take her out and set her free and show everybody. And she does she? She still growls. So that's my Steiff bear. So Margarete Steiff, even though she came from a background where she was very poorly, so sick that she may never have recovered, and she went on to create a business, create a factory. That factory is still there today. It's now very modern, and they still make lots of Steiff soft toys. So I think she's great. Now, another person I want to talk about today is Tu Youyou. Now, we've talked about finding fossils and we've talked about inventing, but Tu Youyou was a scientist who was a pharmacologist, and she grew up in China. She was also like Margarete Steiff, actually. When she was small, she was really sick. She had an illness called tuberculosis, and while she was recovering, she had to stay off school for 2 years. Now, during that time, she decided that when she went back and could study, she would try to study things that could help people. So she went to university and she learned about medicines. She studied modern medicines, and she studied Chinese medicines, traditional Chinese medicine. And she was able to bring the two together and create a medicine for an illness called malaria. Now, malaria is really, really significant. It kills a lot of people every year. A lot of people get very sick from it. And Tu Youyou realized that if she combined the knowledge of ancient Chinese medicine with modern medicine techniques, she could create something new. So she tested lots of different things. She realized that the plant, the sweet wormwood, actually worked. So she tested it and tested it. She tested it on herself, which a lot of scientists do. A lot of early scientists, when they're experimenting, they use themselves as their first guinea pigs. And she came up with a cure. And so her work has saved, I would say, if millions of lives, because people are able to be treated with her medicine and not get sick with malaria. So what she did was incredibly important. It was kept secret for quite a long time. We didn't know about her achievement until the 1980s, when it was made available around the world. And she is actually the first Chinese woman, I think the only Chinese woman, to win the Nobel Prize, which is an amazing science medal, an award for incredible achievements. So she's done something amazing and saved lots of people as well. She's still alive today. I hope she's still working and doing amazing things. But I think she was incredible too. So another person who came from being sick and went on to be someone who was inspirational. Now, people, it's not just people in the past or from a long time ago. We haven't finished creating new things and making new things. And this is Nzambi Mate. She comes from Africa and she's an engineer. Now, she's working at the moment. She's doing incredible work. She is creating these building blocks. She's making blocks out of plastic. She's recycling plastic to make blocks, to make paths. She's working on new materials that may make the bricks stronger, so she can actually build houses with them. It's a really hard-wearing, incredible substance she's made. And it means that things that would normally be thrown away or got rid of are being recycled and reused. So she is at this very moment working on new things and changing the world. So we think about, not only are the women in the past inspirational, but current women are as well. And anywhere in the world can be a scientist, can invent new things and change the future. So you may hear lots of things you talk. I mean, my daughter at the moment this week in school has been learning about recycling and saving the planet. And this is exactly what Nzambi's doing. So I think she's really exciting and great to talk about her. So as I said earlier, it was really difficult to choose 20 people for this book, really too difficult to choose a handful of people to talk about today, and extremely difficult to choose just 20 within the scope of the book. So what we made sure we did was we chose people through time. We chose people from thousands of years ago. We chose people who are currently working today. So from ancient Mesopotamia, where people were making perfume, which is a science and is extraordinary and experimental, to what we see now and people making new medicines and new materials. And it means that anyone watching today, I hope you're inspired. I hope you're inspired to go and find out about these women and see what they do. But we only could choose 20 people. So I've taken the opportunity today to put in someone that I couldn't fit in because there's so many more. There are so many more people that we couldn't put in this book. This is Katherine Johnson. I've included her because my daughter is in year 3 and she's been learning about her recently. So she's told me lots and lots about her. Katherine Johnson was an American mathematician. She her maths was so amazing that she helped get a man to the moon. She was behind the mathematics that got the space shuttle to the moon and back again, which is an equally important thing. Getting it there and getting back is incredible. But she's Black. She was a woman of color, and at the time when she was working in a place of work, she wasn't even allowed to use the same bathrooms as the white women. So she also faced obstacles, ridiculous obstacles that should never have been there, to be able to achieve what she did. So we can see her here at work. And then the last picture of the medal, she's getting a medal from the American president for what she did. She lived to be more than 100. In her lifetime, a movie was made about her. It's a really good movie. It's definitely on one of the streaming services at the moment, and it's totally suitable for you all in Key Stage 2. It's called Hidden Figures. It's very good. Try and look it up. It's brilliant. Go and watch it with your grown-ups. And there was even a Barbie doll made of her, which I think is a really cool thing to say at the end of her life. So these women are great examples of exactly what nonfiction is, and being able to share their stories as a nonfiction writer is the dream for me. It's absolutely amazing. So where can you find more nonfiction? Now, I bet having seen all of this today, you have thought to yourselves, oh yeah, I've read a book about the Romans, or I've read a book about going into space. So nonfiction books can be found anywhere. I can only recommend that you go to your library. that you go, and if you don't have a library in your school, go and ask your grown-up if you can join the local library and go and explore the non-fiction sections, go and find out as much as you can, and go and look at different subjects and see what you enjoy. So you might like learning about rockets, or you might like learning about dinosaurs, and then you can find out as much as possible. And you never know, you might grow up to be a writer or a scientist or someone who works in any kind of STEM. So thank you very much. I've been delighted to talk to you today about all this. Thank you. Kimberly, did you want to start questions now? Would you like me to talk a
Yes,
little bit more
I
about
am.
other things?
No, I am more than happy. I'm just moving it so everyone can see us both at the same time. So if you could stop sharing your screen,
Oh,
Frankie,
yes.
that would be brilliant. Just realised I should be calling you Dr. Frankie. I haven't been doing it.
No, please don't.
So thank you. So who's here? If you have a question, please tell your teacher. And if you click on the Q&A box, we've already got 4 questions in, which is brilliant.
Oh,
You can
brilliant.
ask your own questions as well. So please do put them in. Because Frankie did tell me as well, she'd like to know what you think and if you can challenge her on any of the things she said as
Yes.
well. Because I'm sure you all know lots of fun facts that you can share. So, question: which woman in Eureka inspired you the most, and why?
Oh gosh, that's a really hard question. And every time I open the book, I find I think, oh, I think they're my favorite, or they're my favorite.
Mm,
And it's really difficult. I think I am really taken with Mary Anning. I think because I mean, she was struck by lightning when she was a baby. She shouldn't have even survived, and yet she went on to do extraordinary things. And I think that is another part of what drives the research in the book. So many of the women in this book weren't recognized within their own lifetimes.
mm,
Um, there are lots of women who should have been considered maybe for prizes. We talk about a woman in here called Rosalind Franklin, and she helped discover the structure of DNA. Sadly, she died very young. She had cancer. She died very young. But the people that she discovered it with went on to win the Nobel Prize, that amazing big prize. And unfortunately, she couldn't, so people considered that she missed out, and should have got the same award. But sadly, she died too soon, so her name's not remembered in the same way as the men that she worked with.
oh, it's nice that we get to represent her and celebrate her in your book. And we've got lots of questions in, which is
Good, good, good.
amazing. So I'm going to work my way through them. So we've had one from L. Lowe's, who said, "How many fossils did Mary Anning find?" I don't know if you know.
I have no idea, and I'd love to know if somebody can know, because I know she was amazing at keeping a record of what she studied. I mean, she kept full lists and details of exactly what she had. But I don't know when she started doing that. So maybe when she was a child and she was looking for fossils, they were just immediately sold. And it was only when she was older rather, that she would keep all the data together and keep lists. So I don't know. I would imagine probably she didn't even know. But it would be amazing to find out. And I bet there's lots of ammonites and little pieces in museums or in private collections that people don't know were bought from her. So that's a really good question, and
Very
one
good
I don't know how
question.
to answer.
It's great, thank you. I've got another one from Catherine who said, "We are interested to know what you found out about ice cream. We saw
Oh,
this in your list of non-fiction books to start."
so as part of my research in ice cream, I was asked to create carrot ice cream, because carrot ice cream was something that was used when rationing was in place during the war. You needed something sweet, you'd make carrot ice cream. And I made quite a lot of it because I didn't seem to make very nice versions. I seem to remember I'd spend a lot of time, because bananas are really good. Bananas are sweet and bananas freeze very well. And I don't think I made a very good job of freezing bananas and carrots and doing a good job of it. And I mean, I'm not a great cook anyway. But yeah, so that was the main thing I learned about ice cream, that yeah, it's not as easy to make as it is to eat. But yeah, no, it was a really fun thing to do, and fun. One of the great things about Eureka is that Vicky, not Vicky, sorry, Jenny, who I work with, created 12 experiments to go in the book that go alongside the work that I've done about those women. So a really fun way to learn about nonfiction is to be hands-on and to learn about things and to do experiments and see what works and what doesn't. And as a historian, being able to taste things and try things and smell things and have a sensory engagement with the past is both amazing and really gross sometimes.
I'd be interested to know if everyone puts in the chat if you would try and make your own banana and carrot ice cream. I'm not sure if I
I think I ended
would.
up going down the condensed milk line in the end and using quite a lot of it.
We have got it relates to what you were just saying actually. Do you have a favorite experiment from the book that we could try at home?
Oh, it depends which thing you want to learn about. There's Jenny's done a great job. There's one about making your own fossils. That's really fun and hands-on. There's lots of fun to be had in making your own perfume. Again, it's just fun to experiment and go and pick flowers and see which things you like and which things you don't. And yeah, it's just fun to experiment. So those ones stand out for me. Let me just check the list and remind myself of what other ones she did in here, because I haven't tried all of them out yet. Oh
I
yes,
remember when I was younger, I always used to like trying to make my own perfume. It never went very well, but it was always fun to
right,
try.
okay. So she's got one here about making your own periodic table, so organizing things that you have. So she's, as well as doing things that are really hands-on and experimental, she's got more organized and database things. So yeah, there's fun things, and designing a bridge is one I want to do. Designing and making a bridge is lots of fun because again, you get to be experimental and be a bit silly and have fun and do things that it's fun to have an excuse to do, whether you're building a bridge out of spaghetti or Lego. It's fun to play. I think that's what's the best thing about these. It's you get to play. That's why being hands-on and doing experiments is just a great part of nonfiction.
Definitely. We've got quite a few questions about you becoming an author, so I'm just going to see if we can group a couple together. We have got one which says, who inspired you to start writing? That's from year 5 in RL.
That's That's an amazing question. Who inspired me to start writing? I can't think of as a child, as well as reading nonfiction, I loved fiction. And my favorite author when I was younger was a lady called Lucy Maud Montgomery, who wrote the Anne of Green Gables books. And then when I was small, I met an astrologer called Patrick Moore. And some of you might remember him. He used to present lots of programs about space on the telly. He used to do a show called The Sky at Night. And I met him and he was extraordinary. He talked with such passion and enthusiasm. And I can't have been more than 8 maybe, and I asked him what his favorite planet was, and I remember him telling me Mars because it's most like the Earth and Venus because it's the most beautiful. And I've never forgotten his response because his enthusiasm was just incredible. And that meeting people who are passionate about their field of work is wonderful. So
Lovely. That's great. One person has said, how long did it take you to write this book?
that's a very good question. So this book I was asked to write by the publisher. They came to me, we want this book about women in STEM. Can you write it for us? And what's nice about that is then you get a deadline. So a book like this probably then you know how long you've got. A book like this, it probably took us about 3 months to research and write. And then there's a lot of moving backwards and forwards. So there's an editing process, and where the editor works with me and she'll make suggestions that make it better, or point out things that we don't need in the book or things that we do need in the book. And then it goes to the illustrator and we check in with the illustrator about researching images and making sure we got the pictures of the women themselves where possible, so she's got references. So I definitely finished this book about, oh gosh, when did I submit it? It probably took about, from start to finish, including everyone working on it, probably more than a year, but that's including illustrations. So
That's really good to know. I think that's really useful to know how long it takes to create these brilliant books that you get to read.
And how many
Um,
people are involved as well, Kimberly? I mean, there's not,
mm,
it really is a team effort. I mean, it's amazing to be able to work with such talented people and to benefit from their work. I mean, NER's illustrations are just brilliant. They're appealing and they're clear and they communicate really well and they're just beautiful. So yeah, I'm lucky.
thank you. We've got another one from year five,
I,
who said, what is your favorite non-fiction book at the moment?
at the moment, oh, that's a very good question. I have just got, and I'm reading it at the moment, so I'm going to actually be able to show you. I have just, oh, I say not books over. I've just got Rashmi Surdeshpandi's, Surdeshpandi, I can't say her name. I'm really sorry, Rashmi. Amazing Asia, which is the most extraordinary book about Asia. And it's just, it literally is an encyclopedia of content about a continent. And it's beautiful. And it's beautiful inside and it's just great. So that's my current read, and it's brilliant.
Thank you very much. I'm sure we'll all be looking to get that in our library as well.
Yes,
Um,
do.
we have got one here from Vicky who's asking, what will your next book be about?
Oh, I don't know if I'm allowed to say. I have just finished it. I submitted it this month, and it's gone away to my editor, who's going to come back and tell me things about it. It's about some of my favorite stuff. It ties in with that originally story about the film I told you that inspired me to want to get into non-fiction. So yeah, but I don't know if I can tell you. So I'm going to leave it.
Oh no, we won't make you tell us. We don't want
Look
you to.
out for it.
We will definitely look out. Peace Court have asked, how many pages are in your book?
How many what? Sorry, in my
How
book.
many pages are
How
in
many
your book?
pages? I actually have it in front of me. I can tell you this now. It is 72 pages is the last page, which is our amazing page of chemical elements. So yes.
Yeah, I think that's good to know. And then someone has said, why do you enjoy writing non-fiction as opposed to fiction?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I'm working on a fiction project at the moment, but it's very unfamiliar for me. So normally
Hmm.
when I'm writing nonfiction, everything is about the research, and I start with the research and I build from there. And I'm trying nonfiction, but that all has to come from me, and that's different. I know with nonfiction, I know where the facts are and what's right, and and I know the answers. Whereas with nonfiction, oh, sorry, with fiction rather, it comes from me. I don't know if anyone else is going
Mm.
to like it, and I don't know if it's good. So yeah, it's a very different process, and also with, I mean, as a writer, you never stop learning. I think if once you think, oh, I know how to be a writer, then I don't know, it must become boring because I love the whole learning process of every different article or script or whatever I've had to write. Um, so yeah, they're different processes and I don't know. But I definitely find fiction harder because I don't know what the rules are.
I think there's no rules, and that probably makes it even
Exactly.
harder. We've got some really great questions. So there's one from someone who said, how long have you been studying women in science? And then someone has asked, how old were you started getting interested in science? I'm not sure if they're two different answers.
So specifically looking at women in science for the purposes of being a writer. Well, this book 2 years ago, I think I started it. But generally, as as a historian, I'm always interested in different people. I mean, gosh, I don't know. I don't know if there's a point where I went, oh, I'm really interested in women in science, but always was. I've never not thought, oh, women in science, that's boring. I mean, I talked about that movie Hidden Figures, and I watched that when it first came out, and that was a few years ago now. Um, so yeah, I think just as a historian, you become a magpie for information and things that you find interesting. And unlike with ancient Greece or with medieval history, when I was able to go, oh, I saw a film and that made me interested, or I lived in Nottingham and that made me interested, to be able to pinpoint a moment where I was interested in women in science. I think as a woman, um, when I was small, a lady called Helen Sharman went into space, and she was our first British astronaut. And I remember watching her on the telly all the time, and that showed to me that women could go into space. As a child at that age, all the astronauts I saw were men, and they came from America or they came from Russia, and there she was. I think she came from Sheffield, and she went into space. And I think her spacesuit is at the National Space Museum in Leicester now. So yeah.
That's brilliant. I say it's great to see that you can do it as well when you see other people. Robin has asked, what is the hardest type of scientist to become, do you think?
Ooh, that's a really good question.
It is a very good question.
I don't know. I think because science it evolves so much and there's so much that changes. I think the one thing that is really clear about the scientists that I've written about here is is their passion for it. And I think once you're passionate about something, it doesn't make it easy, but it certainly makes it you have a different approach to it. You engage with it in a different way. It doesn't make it easy, but it makes you more determined to succeed at it. So yeah, I don't know, but that's a very good question. And I think for a lot of the women in this book, just being able to go to school and get past that point was a challenge. So to then
Mm.
be able to become scientists as was difficult for them. And now hopefully it's much easier. And for all the girls who are here today, you can go ahead and be scientists without the same challenges.
Excellent. We've got another question from Year 6 East Court. Who was the hardest person to write about?
So there are two women at the start of the book. There's a lady called Taputi Belatekalim and Mary Hebrea, and they lived such a long time ago that there's very little information about them and their lives. There's enough for us to write about and to know they existed and to know what they did, but we don't get to have that same story where we talk about Mary Anning and we can say, we know she sold this, we know she did that, we have
Mm.
portraits of her. Whereas for them, they lived such a long time ago that we only have minor records or records of people who did similar things to them that we're able to build up a picture of. So they were by far the most difficult people to research.
Vicky wants to know, would you like to own another bear?
Yes,
Yes.
always. Although don't let my 7-year-old know that because she's slowly taking over the house with soft toys.
Excellent. I think we've got time for a couple more questions, so please do keep writing them in because they're very good questions.
What do we think? Should I take
Um,
the bear out of the box? It's been in a box for 30 years. Should I take the
I
bear out of the box?
think we should take the bear out of the box if you don't mind.
I don't know if I could do it now, actually. Can you see?
Oh,
I don't know how it's actually attached in.
it's probably going to be quite hard to get out after 30 years.
Possibly. Hang on. Ah. Oh no, it needs cutting out. I don't have scissors.
No, we'll leave it.
Your bear's not free yet. She's ever so soft.
And then I've got one from Robin here who said, what was the most interesting thing you found when you were writing?
Hmm.
It's going to be this book or any of your other books, something that you found really interesting.
Any of the books? Ooh, that's a good question. Um, one thing I found most interesting. I can't think of one thing. I loved when in one of my previous books I wrote about the ancient Romans, and I loved writing about female gladiators. And that there's what's called a relief, like a picture in the British Museum of a gladiatrix, and women fought as gladiators, and I thought that was amazing because again you build up this picture of what people do in the past and the roles they fill, gender roles and the like, and it's really fun when you discover that something you'd assumed was the case is completely not the case.
Brilliant. And then with the do we've got one in the chat says, how old were you when you wrote your first book?
So my first book was published when I was published when I was 37, I think. So yes, no, 36. I'm lying. I'm 30 with two books out when I was 36, and I'm now finishing writing book number 8. So I'll let you guess how old I am now. But when I was a child, I would definitely write books. I wrote stories about my toys, which my daughter does now about her toys. So I think that's a nice natural progression of learning to write and practicing writing skills and being able to tell stories and use words and yeah,
Oh, it's very sweet. Maybe you and your daughter can sit when you're writing your fiction story together and you can share. It's
steal
always
her
fun.
toys. She's very good at fiction.
And I think the last question is a really nice one. Who is your all-time favorite scientist?
Oh gosh, wow, that is a great question.
It's a big
It
question.
is a big question. I am very fond of anybody. Does it have to be a woman? Can it be anybody at all?
Absolutely anybody.
I am gonna pick because they're local and because I think they did something that has changed my life. I'm gonna pick Alan Turing. Because his story is actually very sad. He's got a very sad story. He died very young. But the idea that he was so good at maths that I can now talk to you on a computer
Mm.
is makes blows my mind. It's amazing. And yeah, I think he's extraordinary, and I'm glad I think his face is on the £50 note now. So yes, he is someone I'm very fond of.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. There's still lots and lots of questions, which is great. Please do send them in and I'll make sure I forward them on to you. Thank you, so you can
Please
have.
do.
So I'm just going to say a big thank you from me and from everyone who has joined us today to hear from you. It's been really fascinating. For one, I didn't even know there were female gladiators, so I've learned that today. And
Excellent.
the book sounds absolutely brilliant. So the book is available to buy now, and then if you buy it, you can do all of those fun experiments to do at home, as well as learning about all of the brilliant women in Eureka. We've also got another event next Thursday, which is non-fiction as well, Frankie. So we're keeping up the brilliant
Good
non-fiction
work.
books. Please do come along to that. So thank you, and I hope you all have a lovely rest of your afternoon. And thank you so much, Frankie, for giving up your time. I'll give you a
Me.
massive round of
Thank
applause from me
you.
and everyone else. Right, have a lovely day. Bye.
Bye.